Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. My guest today really needs no introduction, and this is really an honor for me to be able to talk to him. He is a local legend in Santa Barbara. He's an activist. He's a judge. He's an all-around good individual who's done so much work for this community. And we're going to talk about all your credentials throughout this podcast, but I want to just turn it over to you right now. Judge Frank Ochoa, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Josh. Enjoying life. Addition to the family and my 101-year-old mother who's come to live with us from an assisted living place. And I happen to have a birthday tomorrow, so I've got other family coming in. My brother just got here from Oakland with his wife, and we'll look forward to a small celebration tomorrow.
Wow, 101. That's incredible. That's good genetics there. So, and you're celebrating a birthday. So happy birthday.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, Judge Ochoa, you have we would take the whole hour if I ran down your credentials, but a longtime Santa Barbara County Superior Court judge. I did some research. You were appointed by Governor Jerry Brown. You were the youngest judge at the time appointed to the municipal court, and I just understand you may have been the only Latino appointed, who was serving at that time. And you've done so much with the Legal Aid Foundation, as well as as a Superior Court judge, your drug diversion programs, and really done so much for the community. And what I wanted to talk to you about was a lot of the stuff that you're working on. And I wanted to lead first with something that's sort of in the news right now, which is district elections. As you know, Santa Barbara recently went through this process to redraw the maps for its districts. I want to start right there with that conversation. Have you been following what's going on with the remapping? And I know you have. Talk to me a little bit about what's happening and what's new and what's changed and why this is good for Santa Barbara.
California Voting Rights Act is a pretty strong law requiring jurisdictions, special districts, any local elected official body that has at-large elections and that has not had good or adequate representation of minority groups who are significant in a community, move from at-large elections to district elections. So that happened in 2015 in the Banyales case. I came in a little bit after when they were having to face the process of going through amending the county's charter so that it would comport with the terms of the judgment and make that move from at-large to district elections. There were a number of issues that came up along the way. One of the district members, Kathy Murillo, was elected as mayor, and that left a vacancy in her position. The city wanted to fill that position with an appointment by the other city council members, and that was antithetical to the whole concept of district elections. So we fought that, and they finally ended up going with a special election, and Oscar Gutierrez was elected to District 3 in that election. So I helped draft the city charter amendments that went on the ballot a few years back and made major changes in the structure that complied with the Banyales judgment. We have kept track of what's going on. I work with the District Elections Committee, Jacqueline Inda and Lanny Ebenstein, and some other folks. And we've petitioned a number of local jurisdictions to move from at-large elections to district elections, and in every single instance they've done so. And the census is in a whole wave of jurisdictions are implementing their district election processes. So we have worked with the city. We did into processes that were being conducted by when this case was settled, there were district elections and a process for creating those districts. And a committee of retired judges was called for in terms of the redistricting process in Santa Barbara after the 2020 census. So we had a great deal of involvement with Ariel Caland and the city. Ariel is just a terrific attorney and a good person, easy to work with. And there are a whole number of laws that relate to district elections. And then you have the overlay of the Banyalas settlement and judgment that required, it's in the intent of the judgment was that there be 2 Latino majority districts in Santa Barbara. That became the first and the third districts. Because of demographic changes, it was very difficult to do that this time. But our demographer, Dr. Lenny Ebenstein, worked with the city's demography group and really went through an intensive process that considered a lot of different input and ultimately resulted in the maps that the committee of judges is recommending that the city council adopt. Now, that original intent of having 2 Latino majority districts was not able to be achieved because of demographic changes. But there is one Latino majority district, and the other is a minority majority district. Mm-hmm. If you put together the percentage of Latino voting age population, along with other minority group voting age population, then you have a higher than 50% representation still in District 3.
Yeah.
District 1 remains majority Latino, and District 3 is majority minority, which is as close as we can get under these circumstances. And the District Elections Committee supported that.
Yeah, it was really cool to watch these 3 judges have these conversations, to hear from the public and come to these decisions about what these maps would look like. The public was very involved and absolutely necessary because, you know, these judges are not from the area. And so they're coming at it from a real linear perspective. They're looking at everything, but they don't have the sort of sense of the town that the local people do. So dividing up some of these communities on paper might seem like it is appropriate, but as a practical matter and how communities and neighborhoods move and work, it wasn't. So the public was really good at sort of offering that feedback. And then we saw many revisions finally to get to the maps that we're at with what's going to go before the city council. I want to talk to you big picture about district elections. You know, some people will say that they don't work because they may not be getting the most qualified person in office. You know, if you have multiple people who live in the same district who are very qualified, only one can win, whereas in the past and in at large, it really didn't matter where they would live. Do you have any thoughts on how things have gone so far with district elections in Santa Barbara? Do you think it's for the better?
Well, I guess the proof is in the pudding. Prior to district elections, there had been at most 1 Latino on the city council at any point in time, and often there were none.
Right.
Just before this last electoral cycle, out of the 10 persons on the city council, you had 3 Latinos. So you had District 1, District 3, and the mayor as Latinos. That never happened before.
Right.
So in terms of that ethnic group having a voice in the public setting, it's clear that district elections had a monumental impact on the representation of Latinos in city government in Santa Barbara.
Right.
And Santa Barbara has a Latino population of 35, 38%. And to think about the fact that for many years there were no Latinos on the city council, and that large of a percentage of persons in the community, let alone the history of Latino involvement, and the fact that this was a Spanish and then a Mexican town, to create a process where you have representation of those local communities was critical. And yes, those persons represent the interests of the entirety of the city, and they do that. That is an obligation that they have, and that they take seriously. I don't see any side, and I think it's been a great benefit. Now, there are still some problems that exist. Mm-hmm. We have the winner takes all voting process, and that should probably have changed when we went through the move to district elections, and the move of elections from odd years to even years, to put them in the same realm as the federal electoral system.
Are you talking about the mayor system? The winner, the mayor is the highest vote getter, but you maybe you could have a runoff between the top two, and people who voted for somebody else might be able to change their votes in November from June. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, we have a system where it's referred to as first one the post wins past the finish line. So if you have 5 persons running for an office, the highest vote getter wins. That means somebody with 21% of the vote could win. The last 2 mayoral elections in the city of Santa Barbara, the person who was elected had less than 50% of the votes. There are other systems that are used widely and predominantly in other jurisdictions. The system where you have a primary, top 2 go to a runoff in a general election. There's a ranked choice voting process where people, if there are 5 candidates, people rank their candidates in terms of a choice: first, second, third, fourth. And if there's not 50%, you lop off the bottom vote getter and recalculate the numbers. I think it's a disadvantage for someone to be in a position of, say, mayor of Santa Barbara and not be able to say, I was elected by more than 50% of the people in my community. So I think that's an issue that the district elections committee is concerned about. It was something that, with all the other things that were happening, was not dealt with in that original go round, and deserves the attention of the city council in terms of a potential change that would benefit the electoral process here. If you have 5 candidates, everybody runs, you have a primary election, a top 2 go to a general election, the person who wins is going to get 51% plus of the vote.
Yeah.
So I think that's a worthwhile change. That's the way things are done in most other electoral processes, and would be a benefit to the community.
So is there a group that's going to get that going, or how does that movement start?
That's on the agenda for the district elections committee, and we're going to be developing and presenting a petition to the city council so that we can get it on on their plate in terms of issues to take a look at.
Yeah. Is that coming up this year, this 2022, you think?
I think so. I think we'll probably get to it in the next few months.
Mhm.
And it's certainly something that I think would benefit the community. We should get it out there, get the discussion process going, see what the community really wants in terms of improving that electoral process. I think that the plurality in a single election process is problematical and can be improved upon.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing on this topic before we move on. There's some other things I want to talk to you about, but what would you say, Judge, to somebody who just says, I don't like district elections. The best person should win. We should not be carving out districts to ensure that Latinos win or that a minority population wins. Why can't we just run and let the people who get the most votes win? Why do we have to have districts? What would you say to somebody who has that perspective? And we know that there are people with that perspective.
I would say that's how things were for a long time. And if you have a jurisdiction that is 35 or 40% minority and 5% non-minority, it's a system that is built toward getting representatives from one group in, and some people may think that's fair. The California legislature didn't agree with that. It created the California Voting Rights Act because of that at-large kind of system leading to underrepresentation of minority viewpoints. So one way to look at it is that it's kind of insulting for people to think that someone who comes from a district has any less degree of ability to look at issues and consider them and have input that considers their district, but also the city at large in terms of making decisions. Mm-hmm. Representation is critical at all phases of our society. There need to be Latinos on the bench. Many of the users of the justice system are Latinos. If you have all Anglos on the bench, that presents a problem, not just in terms of optics, but in terms of process of representation and representation of interests. So I think representation by minority groups and women. When I was appointed to the bench, there had not been a Spanish surnamed judge in Santa Barbara County since the 1870s. And De la Guerra was elected in 1868. There was an effort to get him off the bench with the argument that he was not a citizen. Mm. They had been, the De la Guerras had been here forever. But there was an effort to get him off, even though he was elected by the people. Resulted in a California Supreme Court case in 1870 that said, no, that's not right. Seat the judge. Yeah. Jack Ricard was a Latino, spoke beautiful Spanish. I really admired him and his work on the bench. His involvement and representation in the court process, I think, was critical. But when I was appointed, I was the only one. Yeah. That's changed. There are other Latinos on the bench now, mostly in North County. But that kind of representation lets the population governed by the court system or by a city council or by a special district know that they're represented. Look at what just happened in terms of a Black woman being appointed and confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. That is very symbolically important and structurally important in terms of there being representation across the boards of persons who have traditionally been excluded from governmental office and many of its processes. There need to be Latinos in law enforcement and in the firefighting groups and other minorities and women. That is foundational to our societal structure and benefits it. And I don't see a downside. No. I just don't.
Yeah, it's super beneficial just in terms of understanding those communities. So obviously, if you're a judge, you can understand some communities better than maybe an Anglo judge could. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, that applies. It also matters that if you're a young Mexican American, Latino kid, in California, you and I walk outside, we're everywhere, right? We're all over the place. But, if you don't see yourself represented in those positions of leadership, if you don't see your teachers, if you don't see your elected officials, your judges, your CEOs, whomever it is, look like you start to wonder, oh, how come everybody's over here and only certain people are over there? So it is super beneficial. Someone like Oscar Gutierrez and the others who've been elected, they're role models without even trying, without even knowing, just because people see them as being there, and maybe they could be there too. I want to talk to you. You retired, but you're really not. You're doing so much work in the community. One of the things that you've been so focused on has been Juana Flores and this effort to get her citizenship after she had lived here for so many years, raised a family in Goleta. Her son serves in the armed forces, and I'll let you explain it, but because of our legal system, she's no longer allowed to be in this country permanently, even though her son is a soldier. He defends our freedoms and our rights in this country, and he was born here, and she's here now for a little while, but not for very long, depending on what you and others can do. It's a really sad story. Can you talk about Juana Flores in this situation and what you're doing to keep her here in the U.S.?
Well, Juana Flores is a wonderful person. She's gracious. She's involved in her community. She and her husband are homeowners in Goleta. They raised 10 children here. They now have 19 grandchildren. And she came here without legal authorization 30 plus years ago. At one point in time, she went home because her mother was terminally ill, and she wanted to see her one last time. She did so and then came back across. It was 1999, and she was stopped, and she didn't have legal authority to enter the country, and she was administratively removed. Well, that administrative removal by a federal statute created a bar for her from applying for status unless she'd been out of the country for 10 years. And given all of the circumstances, when her husband went through an adjustment of status, he'd done basically the same thing, come here without authorization, made a life here, developed a family structure, and involved himself in the community. but he didn't have this administrative removal. So he's now a citizen. He's become a citizen. She tried to become a citizen at the same time, but this administrative removal in 1999 creates a statutory bar for her being able to be here. The INS or ICE now could grant someone humanitarian parole and let them stay here, even if they're not legally qualified to do so. It's a general power that they have in an exercise of discretion. The Obama administration had allowed her to stay, and she would apply for humanitarian status on a regular basis, go into the ICE offices and check in. And then the Trump administration pulled the plug on that and said, not doing that anymore. So they required Juana Flores to self-deport and go to Mexico, where she had no family, no direct immediate family, and took her away from her husband, who has health issues that she was taking care of, her 10 children, one of whom is disabled, and she was the primary caretaker of, a son who, as you mentioned, is an Air Force sergeant. So he's off defending his country, and the country is deporting his mother. She's never had a traffic ticket, a model citizen, somebody we would all be proud to have in our family or in our community. And she was helping take care of her grandchildren so that her children could work in their jobs in hospitals and schools and be productive members of society. So she left in, I think it was April of 2019, at the direction and order of the federal government. And then the last election happened and the Biden administration came in, and we renewed the humanitarian parole application, and it was granted, and she came back in June. But that's a temporary fix that just allows her to stay here on an annual basis. And here down the road, it could be yes and it could be no. So we're looking for a permanent resolution to this family circumstance. So we've moved from bring Juana home to keep Juana home in terms of our strategy. And we're doing a couple of things. We're obviously going to renew the humanitarian parole application to keep her here. We are, in addition, asking President Biden to grant her a pardon. She was never convicted of anything, but she did, when she came without papers, is technically an offense against the United States. And that's what creates the bar for her applying to get regularization of her status. So if she is pardoned by the president for that offense, then she would, that 10-year bar, which doesn't allow her to apply for a status, would be removed. So that's our primary avenue. We're also looking at our Congressman Salud Carbajal has put into the hopper HR 454, which is a bill that would allow immediate family members, parents of active duty service members to apply for status. And the military estimates that there are about 10,000 people who could potentially be positively impacted by that law. We're also dealing with Senator Alex Padilla and Senator Dianne Feinstein and asking them to consider individual legislation. Congress has the power to, and has a number of times done individual bills for people who are are deserving of special consideration to allow them to adjust status, irrespective of what the landscape looks like legally elsewhere. So we're doing all these different things. We've had really strong local support that's greatly appreciated from members of the Santa Barbara Board of Supervisors, Joan Hartman, Das Williams, Greg Hart, Catherine Murillo when she was mayor, and continuing on, great supporter in terms of our dealings with the federal government about trying to get this issue resolved through either a pardon or special legislation or general legislation. People on the Santa Barbara City Council, the Goleta City Council, en masse has said, this is a member of our community,
Yeah.
a productive member. We want her to be able to reside in our community. So we've had really strong local support. We're shifting into getting that support to the president's office so that we can hopefully get the pardon done, taken care of. And we're also going to be asking folks to write to our state, our US senators to see if they can help us with a legislative resolution. I do want to say one thing. The way I got involved in Juana's case was I got a call.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said, there's something happening in our community that I think is unjust, and these people need help, and can you help them? I'm not an immigration guy. I don't know immigration law. So I said, well, let me talk to an immigration lawyer, and I made that connection, and I said, I want to help on this case. This is something that is important. The person who called me and asked me to help to find legal help for these folks was Bill Brown, our sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
He saw that what was happening was unjust.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate his noticing that this was an issue that was deserving of attention and assistance, and for making that connection.
Yeah, you had sent over some videos, for me to watch in preparation for this conversation, and I did watch the hearing that Alex Padilla chaired, or some of it, and there were other examples of situations of people who are in a similar situation to Juana Flores. There was the guy who was pulled away out of his home by ICE in front of his 10-year-old daughter and taken back to Jamaica, and has not been back yet, and talked about all the trauma that his children have experienced from having to see him removed forcibly from the home just because he had was honest. He filled out on a box that he had a prior marijuana possession conviction. His attorney at the time told him to plead guilty. There's a lot of circumstances there. And then when he was applying for a job, he checked that, and it came back to haunt him, and all of a sudden he's gone. So I don't think the law is in place, immigration law, for those kinds of cases. Like, we're talking about people who've lived good lives, important, they've contributed lives here in the US, and then stripped away from their families. That's hard to see how anyone can justify that. I mean, these are parents. This is a mom, this is a dad.
Yeah, no, it's we're in a precarious kind of situation where many people have lost sight of the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. My father's family came from Mexico. My mother's family were immigrants from Denmark and Norway. And on that side of the family, I have an English line to the Bigelows, who came here in the second Pilgrim wave in 1630. We are a mix of people from around the world, and there's been this unfortunate resurgence of nativism in this country, which is effective policy efforts at the national and state and local levels, which is really, in my view, just un-American. It's not what America is about. And efforts to try to restrict education about the history of this country and the nativism and racist tendencies that can occur in all groups is unwise, and it can only lead to negative ends.
I want to ask you about you on your background and your upbringing. There's obviously lots of bio information about you out there on your professional career, but can you take me back to Frank Ochoa as a boy growing up, and what your dreams were and what your parents were like, and how did you decide to be what you wanted to be?
Well, my father was a Spanish teacher. He was a great Spanish teacher. He was the kind of teacher that students would come back decades later and say, you were the teacher who made a difference in terms of my career path and what I wanted to do. He taught Spanish at the high school level, at the junior college level, at the university level. He taught the Peace Corps and federal government employees. He taught them Spanish. Interesting story. He taught at Long Beach City College. I grew up in Long Beach, California, and I remember a time when I was in high school when he was really upset and lamenting the fact that he had applied for a position at Long Beach City College on the Spanish department as a teacher, right on the regular staff, and he didn't get the job. They hired a woman who he'd been teaching for decades. They hired a person who was on the substitute teaching list for the high schools, and the rationale was that she also spoke French. And he was going through the woe is me, I'm not good enough. And I told him, I said, Dad, look, you teach this high level of Spanish at Long Beach City College at night after you teach high school in the day. And in that class, the department head who teaches the class in the day when most of the students are there has 5 students enrolled. At night, when very few of the students take their coursework, you have 45 students. There's a reason for that. Now, there are 5 professors in the Spanish department in Long Beach City College. This is back in the 60s. And they are all white males. And I told him, it's not that you're not good enough. It's that you're too good. Letting you in is a threat to them. And I think that made a difference for him in terms of his not retiring, and he went on to become an administrator in the ABC school district, Orange County. He developed the multilingual, multicultural programs there that became beacons or landmarks for people around the state and the country, and that were studied by major universities in terms of ways to develop programs that are linguistically and culturally sensitive to all the ethnic groups that you have in your community. Mm-hmm. So I knew my dad was the best, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And he was treated by the system in a way that was manifestly unfair. Mm-hmm. He let it get him down for a while, but then he came back and pushed through and did some really terrific things. I still get comments from people, some of whom are in education up here in Santa Barbara, about they knew my dad.
Mhm.
He was of tremendous meaningful input to them in their career development. So, I always back on him when I think about difficult circumstances and how society can present barriers and how you have to work through them. And when I see Ketanji Brown Jackson being confirmed for the Supreme Court, I think about my father.
Yeah.
And other people, Reynoso, who was one of the greatest legal minds that I ever encountered, and who rose to the California Supreme Court, but then was voted off. How can you explain that? That it makes no sense. So there is a constant battle. I have a quote by Frederick Douglass that I keep handy. And he said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. This struggle may be a moral one, or maybe a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. That was Frederick Douglass in 1857, obviously 3 years before the Civil War started. But those battles are still going on. I teach law and civil rights in the Chicano Studies Department at UCSB. And there are lots of students going through college today who don't know that there were segregated schools for Mexican Americans up to the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And people have heard of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 for the African American community, but they don't know Mendez versus Westminster. They don't know that there was a lawsuit in the mid 1940s attacking segregated schools in Orange County, California, and that a very courageous, another one of my heroes, a federal court judge, I think his name is McCormick, could be corrected on that, who said that Plessy versus Ferguson, that 1896 Supreme Court decision that said separate but equal is okay, that federal court judge said it's not okay. And the Supreme Court was wrong. Well, you had a trial court judge telling the Supreme Court, no, you got that one wrong. His decision was followed 8 years later by the U.S. Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education. That's part of our legal history.
Yeah.
Those are things that people need to be aware of so that we can make sure that we don't make the mistakes in the future that we made in the past, and that we can build in a constructive way in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious community structure. That's what America's about.
Yeah, well said. Now, from my research, I think you went to UCSB and then UC Davis. How did you get into law? Why was that important to you? You know, your father's a teacher. You probably have many options. Why law?
Well, I graduated from Millikan High School in Long Beach in 1968. And in early April of 1968, just before my 18th birthday, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then I had friends who were working on Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. It looked like he was going to be moving in and be in a strong position to win the presidency on an anti-war and a civil rights platform. And he had close ties with Cesar Chavez and the UFW. and he was assassinated. That was 6 weeks after Martin Luther King was killed. So and the war was going on, and there were gold stars being put next to the people who were graduates on the high school boards outside. There were gold stars for those classmates of mine or classes ahead of mine who were killed in Vietnam. So there was a war that many of us thought, most of us thought, was unjust. And we were looking at the possibility of not being able to go to college or being conscripted into the military to go fight this war that none of us agreed with. So lots of things that we wanted to change about the world, about the country and its direction. I saw the laws of to do that, to try to improve things, to try to influence the direction of the country. And so I went to law school, and very soon after I graduated and became a lawyer, I had the chance to work the Bakke case, which was an important civil rights case in the 70s. And although I was a very young lawyer, very new, the work I did with other civil rights lawyers had an influence on how that case came out. And I was quoted in News 1977. I was 18 months in practice about the Bakke case and the direction it was going and the influences that it might have. And I was quoted in a paragraph with Cruz Reynoso, who was one of my mentors and models in the legal field. So there are a number of other things I did had an impact. There was a high degree of tension at one point in time after a party was broken up, and 100 minority kids, Black and brown kids, were arrested in Woodland, California. And there were demonstrations and a really tense situation. I got to work with the mediators from the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in conduct a lengthy community, city, government, the city manager and the police chief about how to calm things down and work together, create some new policies for the police department, for communication with the community. So I was able to do some things early on. I think were very meaningful to me and to the community that I was serving. And it really verified to me that being involved in the law can give you the opportunity to have a positive impact.
I want to wrap up sort of coming back to your time in Santa Barbara as a Superior Court judge. I think a lot of people who aren't from Santa Barbara, we know, think that, oh, that must be a good gig, right? It's Santa Barbara, it's paradise, it's, you know, that's the beach, it's wealthy community. What kind of cases did you see, and what do you sort of see as sort of your impact there? I know you worked a lot with drug diversion and, you know, not wanting to put people in jail for, you know, long lengths of terms or working with them, other methods. I guess you're progressive in that regard, because that's what we hear so much about now in terms of diversion from the criminal justice system. Can you talk about your time and why it was important for you to sort of try to keep people out of jail and prison, as odd as that sounds as a judge?
I think that's the key. we have the highest rate of incarceration of any country in the world. It doesn't have to be that way. And when I was like 12 years on the bench, out of the 32 total, I started to see the same people over and over again, and many of them with alcohol problems. And my sending them to jail was very expensive for the society and was not helping those people. So I started to look into the drug court model in the late 1980s and helped develop the first drug courts here. And it was pretty amazing. What you do in drug courts is that you use the power of the criminal justice system to keep people in treatment until the light bulb turns on and they realize that they can have a life. A large percentage of the caseloads in courts have at their foundation drug and alcohol problems. So you got to get to the problem at its source. And jail is the end of the, flushing down the sewer lines way to deal with the problem. If you get ahead of it and try to get people into treatment, it's a lot less expensive, and it's more humanitarian in terms of the way you're resolving the problem, and it has a chance of working. Jail does not cure alcoholism or drug abuse problems. So I started the first drug courts here in 1990 or 91. And at the time, there were 25 or 30 drug courts around the country. Every jurisdiction now has drug courts. And yeah, it was, for many of the older judges, it was, why are you doing that? That's not what we're about. And well, if there is a societal problem that's leading people into your courtroom in the criminal justice arena, then you have a responsibility to try to find out newer, innovative ways to try to resolve those issues and get people back into a productive path. And you do that with drug courts. We also have treatment courts in the domestic violence area. We have specialized courts for veterans who've seen terrible circumstances and suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder issues that lead them into the criminal courts. So it's unfortunate that we don't have an adequate mental health system in this country, and because of that, a lot of people end up in the criminal justice system. So I've always been a proponent of developing mental health resources and having the community be proactive about mental health concerns, so that we don't let people get on a course that's going to lead them to a life behind bars. When I became the presiding judge of the court, I helped guide the court through the move to state control and a consolidation of the municipal and superior courts into one superior countywide superior court. I inherited the juvenile court assignment, and discovered that there were no drug treatment resources for juveniles anywhere in the county. That was astonishing to me. Mm-hmm. So the Bryant Youth Center developed, and we developed other resources, and I developed a juvenile drug court after having done the same thing in the adult criminal court system. I really enjoyed the juvenile court assignment because there's pretty heavy representation by the Latino community as clients in the juvenile court system. And it's when you have a chance to really touch people and impact them and maybe change their lives. And I still have what were then kids in juvenile court who I maintain contact with and help talk to them through issues in life.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that that's the case. And, you know, it's sending someone to jail is easy.
Mhm.
Realizing that they have a problem that may need application of other community resources and helping find those other community resources is more difficult. So why take the easy route when it doesn't result in a good end? If you can put a little more time in and make the community linkages to try to get someone some help and get some redirection, and turn them into a productive member of society.
Yeah.
That's what I think a primary focus of the justice system should be.
Well, thank you so much, Judge Frank Ochoa, for this conversation and everything that you do. You do so much, both as an activist and in retirement, so much over your career, and you're a role model for so many people, and you've helped so many people. So I appreciate you taking time to share a little bit of your story, and good luck with everything you're working on.
Well, Josh, likewise, I appreciate you, given what's happened in the last few years and with the outbreak of fake news, of alternate realities in terms of facts that are not grounded in reality at all, and the way that the media has been split in that regard. I appreciate someone who hews the line, who knows the journalistic ethics, who takes the responsibility of reporting the truth and yet still getting in depth to facilitate people's understanding of the issues is of critical importance to our society. So appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you. I've been around a long time now, so it's been
Yes,
fun.
indeed.
All right. Well, thank you, Judge Ochoa. I appreciate your time. Have a great day and happy birthday again.
Thanks.